name is Luke, and I'm from San Diego. And for purposes of the camera and for those whose Ukrainian is pretty rusty like myself, I woke up this morning in Detroit, Michigan, and I flew to Seattle, and from Seattle to here. I live in San Diego. I'm born and raised in San Diego, but I came here a lot as a kid. We had some distant relatives. They're family friends, but they were actually relatives, and they lived on Maui. And I remember visiting them when I was very little. And старенькі люди були, родина Ворона, and they had heating in their house, and it was like August, and they had the heat on full blast, and they were cold and protyak and just. So I remember that very vividly as a child. So I've been coming here a lot, and I'm going to talk about the Bandura. A lot of cultures have bagpipes. They have flutes. They have guitars. They have a variety of stringed instruments, but nobody has this. In Ukraine, we have duda, right? We have a bagpipe. We have a sopilka. We have a skripka. We have cymbale. But other cultures have dulcimers. No one has a bandura. This is unique to us, and this is unique to our people. And with the spread of the Soviet Union and Russian oppression, the bandura left Ukraine. And one of the first places the bandura went outside of Ukraine was Prague. And another place it went to was Harbin, China. And there was a bandura school in Harbin, China, and they built banduras in Harbin, China. So, like many things are built in China, banduras were built in China. This one was made in Detroit, Michigan in the 1950s. So, with much of what's happening today in Ukraine, it's happened, as we know, over the course of many years, and that's what spread the bandura out. I'm going to start, like we do with most things in this season, with a rantsievka. And historically, Ukrainians, a long time ago, celebrated the New Year around spring, probably around the spring. Yeah, around Easter was it historic, like Nowruz in Iran. It was a New Year's period, and so these rantsievke, they would go from house to house, like we do Kolyada, we go Christmas caroling house to house. We do it on Shedri Večer, we go house to house. Where they would go house to house in the spring season, and these rantsievke are usually songs that start rano 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 rano. So it's usually like early in the morning, and that denotes like an older song. So this song is early in the morning. Kuroinke pile. Що Христос вже воскрес, воістину воскрес. Well, what does the chicken have to do with Easter? Not a whole lot. And then раненько встала, сад замітала. Well, what does raking and sweeping your garden have to do? But this is a mold, a Christianization of a Ukrainian folk song, and we add kind of a Christian Easter element to it. So I'm going to start with this, and then I'm going to go through a few other songs and explain a little bit about the bandura. So, in the Ukrainian culture, the bandura has been around for centuries, and we knew it as a kobza, and the person who plays it was a kobzar. And typically, but not always, but typically they were blind. Because if you think of it, 150 years ago, if you were blind, what were your prospects? What were your economic prospects? Rope making, being a minstrel, begging. So there were a variety of instruments where there were blind minstrels, and they were the soul of the people, the conscience of the people, the city, the pages. They would transmit the news. They were also the moral voice of the people. They played hurdi-gurdis, kind of like these lire. They had violins. They had guides because they were blind, but a lot of them played a variant of this bandura, like 20 strings. And there were some players that we know throughout the ages. Ivan Mazepa played the bandura, or predecessor of it. Taras Hrhorovich Shevchenko was one of them, and he wrote a lot about the kobzars. And around this time, at the turn of the last century, there was a new science of ethnomusicology that was sweeping Ukraine and much parts of the world. And one of them was Mykola Lysenko, who we know wrote Bože Veliki, among many other pieces. And then some of his disciples, Leontovich, Khotkevich, and others. Lysenko, by the way, was a pallbearer for Taras Shevchenko at his funeral. And they went around, and Lesya Ukrainka was an ethnographer as well. And we actually have recordings of Lesya Ukrainka singing, and Lesya Ukrainka in the Crimean Peninsula recording a blind kobzar. Like 1905, like a wax cylinder. It's really, it's really tinny. But here's somebody in Crimea playing the bandura. So in 1902, one of the ethnographers, his name was Hanat Khotkevich, brought a group together in Kharkiv. And this was kind of the first symposium gathering of these blind kobzari, and a lot of their material was written down. And from there, and from that period, came a renowned player named Vasil Yemets. And Vasil Yemets, in November of 1918, formed the Kobzar Kapella in Kyiv, and the theater was in the Bergonye Theater, which is on Khmelnytsky and Khreshchatyk. It's now the Lesya Ukrainka Russian Drama Theater. That Russian drama was just taken out legislatively, but in that theater, and it was November 3rd, 1918. There's a group of 8 men, and they gathered on the stage, and this formed the first Bandura Kapella, and I belong to that group. It's 107 years old, and we performed last night in Detroit, Michigan. And the first song that they played at the Bergonye Theater on November 3rd, 1918, was Vstaya Khmara, by the music by Vasil Yemets and the words by Taras Shevchenko. So that was the opening song. That was the opening song played on November 3rd, 1918 at Bergonier Theater in Kyiv. And around this time, and the person who rented the theater was Hetman Pavlo Skoropadsky. And at this time, the Bandura government was coming into power, and there were two choirs that were formed. One was conducted by Kirill Stitsenko, and they stayed in Ukraine. And the other was conducted by Alexander Koshets, and they were sent out of Ukraine as a diplomatic choir to proclaim this new Ukrainian republic. And this Ukrainian choir that went outside of Ukraine went to Paris and to Austria, and they went all over. And they came to New York City in October of 1922. And they had their standard program that they were touring for a few years. And one of the songs was, it debuted Szczedrik, that was written by Leontovich. And there was a gentleman, Peter Wilhowski, who was in the theater that night, and he was Ukrainian descent from like Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. He heard it, and he was a music teacher, and he made it into Carol of the Bells. Well, that tour, they went to Mexico, they went to Brazil, Argentina, they went all over, and they went to San Diego, California, where I'm from. And one of the songs that they performed on their tour was this Kant. Or it's also, another way of saying it is a Duma, and this is about the Pochayev Mother of God, and the Pochayev, the apparition of the Pochayev, of the Mother of God in Pochayev, which is in western Ukraine, near Ternopil. And the monastery was being surrounded by this Turkish army, and the Mother God appeared. And so this song was also orchestrated by Leontovich, who did Carol of the Bells, and I'm going to play this song. So this was on tour as well.
Вечора
турків бивала, монастир рятувала. Unfortunately, the Pochayev Monastery is still under the control of the Moscow Patriarchate in Western Ukraine. But maybe one day that will change. So this song, the Pochayev Mother of God, was taken by Leontovich and it went by Koshitz, and it went North America, South America, Europe, and a lot of these folks had to stay because Ukraine had a rough time in the early 1920s, and most of them did stay in the New World, including a relative of mine who sang in that choir. So with that, Ukrainian music came to North America. Vasil Yemitz, who I played a song from earlier, went from Prague and he settled in Los Angeles, and he passed away in Los Angeles. And another large figure at that time, his name was Hryhorij Trofimovich Katatsky. And he was from a town called Kobalyaki, which is in Poltava. And he was from a family of iconographers and church musicians. And he went to the conservatory and he learned the bandura because in the 1920s and the 1930s, the blind kobzari were celebrated. And the bandura gained a lot of popularity in kind of a classical conservatory setting. Unfortunately, a lot of the kobzari were killed because they were subversive. Their message was subversive. They sang about truth. They sang about morality. They sang about God. They sang about the dignity and freedom of a human being, and that wasn't the political agenda of the day. So there were a lot of these bandura players, and they took the bandura to Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, the stands. They did a tour of the Soviet republics in the 1930s. And then we know the war broke out in World War II, and a lot of these bandura players were captured by the Germans, and they were called Ostarbeiters, which means that they were working as effectively slaves, captured people for the German war machine. And they were in munitions factories and things in Germany. And the morale was very low because there's a lot of 14 and 15 and 16-year-olds who were taken out of Eastern Europe and they were forced to work and they're separated from their families. And the German command realized that there was a group of musicians there that could play this instrument. So they shipped them back to Ukraine behind German lines and to kind of boost the morale of people. And then the Soviets started closing in, and these bandura players fled to the west to the American lines, like a lot of other people did. And so Hryhorij Katatsky came with this ensemble that was started on November 3rd, 1918. They went in Ukraine in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. They came to the United States after 4 years in a displaced person camps in Germany. And Hryhorij Katatsky brought the group over in 1949. And one of the songs he wrote is Oi Ishli Nashi Slavni Zaporovsi. And this is about the Cossacks in Zaporizhia, which we know has also had some trouble recently. And these Kossaki, they're at their fort, they're having a good time, and then they get surrounded by the Muscovites. And then bombs start coming in and the fort's ruined. And we know this was the beginning of the movement of the Cossacks from Zaporizhia to the Kuban. And so this song is from this period. And this is by Hryhorij Katatsky. And it talks about they're surrounded and these bombs fly from the Moscow side. But the people didn't break. And this is a very old song, but the topic is repeating itself. So I'm going to play it.